Now you've probably heard that RTX 5050 is not the best GPU that Nvidia has released, but why am I building a system with it? Let's talk about it. As the time goes on, current GPUs become old and new GPUs replace the current ones. In this case, RTX 5050 is both the cheapest and the newest GPU from Nvidia on the market. Why didn't I go for an AMD GPU? Well, because it's simply more expensive. Obviously, the prices are gonna differ based on where you live, but in my country, RTX 5050 is actually cheaper than RX 7600 non-XT, which by the way should be performing similarly, but it actually loses to RTX 5050 in majority of the games. Plus, it's not even current generation anymore. As for the Intel Arc P580, it really doesn't exist in our market. Not a single person in this country wants an Intel GPU, which leaves us with one and only option, RTX 5050. And yes, you can always buy a used GPU instead, like an RTX 3060 Ti or even an RTX 3070, both of which are miles better than RTX 5050 by the way. But you have to keep in mind that not everyone is gonna go for a used GPU. I'm fortunate enough to have the knowledge and the experience to know what I'm doing, but the majority of the people do not have that luxury, especially in a country such as mine. But that still doesn't explain why I don't build a PC with an RTX 3070 instead. To answer that, I'm just gonna say that bigger number is always better in a customer's eyes. Why don't I just explain it to them? Well, simply because they still do not care. So here I am. I'm building a brand new gaming PC with an RTX 5050, which by the way, and this is honestly kinda sad, might become the most demanding configuration on our market. Speaking of which, here's the specs of this PC. Really minimalistic, but it's exactly what people want. The bare minimum for the least amount of price. But how good is this gaming PC in modern games? And can we have an enjoyable gaming experience on an RTX 5050? Counter-Strike 2. High settings at native 1080p resolution. Not a graphically intensive game, but I still wanna test it because it's modern and it's still a popular esports title, which seems to be running quite well on our PC. Now obviously stutters are gonna be non-existent here. Our specs are just way too overkill for a simple game like this, but I still wanna point out how smooth it actually feels. In this 10-minute deathmatch, the FPS never dropped below 140, and sometimes it even went into low 200s. A great gaming experience altogether. GTA 5 Enhanced. Ultra settings at native 1080p resolution. Another modern but easy to run game. Again, nothing that our PC cannot handle. And I know that 11th Gen i5 and RTX 5050 can do way more than this, but I decided to test it anyway because GTA 5 is still an extremely popular game in my country. Every time I build a gaming PC, I keep getting asked the same question: how does it perform in GTA 5? And in case it's not already obvious from the video, let me just say that the game is running amazing on the highest settings. No dips or drops of any kind, and it's honestly an enjoyable gaming experience all around. Forza Horizon 5. Extreme settings at native 1080p resolution. We'll be using the built-in benchmark here cause it actually does a great job at imitating the real gameplay, which by the way looks cool and all, but I also wanna point out that our VRAM is already being fully utilized. Never thought I would say this, but 8 gigs of VRAM is starting to feel kinda not enough even on an RTX 5050. Yes, the game is running well and we're not seeing any frame drops whatsoever, but once you decide to multitask, like open a stream or even a simple YouTube video, it's gonna take up an additional gigabyte of VRAM, which we won't be able to provide cause we only have like 200 megabytes to spare. So what's gonna happen? The short answer is either the game is gonna start stuttering or the video that you're trying to watch. And yes, you could just lower the settings and free up a bit of extra VRAM, but it still makes me worried how these 8GB GPUs are gonna age with time. A discussion that I will be dedicating a whole video to, but for now, let's get back to testing games. Red Dead Redemption 2. Here I went with the balanced preset at native 1080p resolution. Initially, I thought that our CPU would be a bit of a bottleneck in crowded areas, but it seems that i5-11400F is still quite capable and has no problem delivering a solid 60 plus FPS. The game honestly ran flawlessly throughout this whole benchmark, and it was an enjoyable gaming experience once again. Sons of the Forest. High settings at native 1080p resolution. Again, pretty good results across the board. And I get that RTX 5050 is not an amazing GPU, but for someone that doesn't follow statistics and just wants to get a modern and budget gaming PC, this kind of configuration should more than satisfy their needs. Halo Infinite. High settings at native 1080p resolution. Could have gone with Ultra, but I personally prefer a bit higher FPS on lower settings. Besides, if we set the graphics to Ultra, we would be using pretty much all of our VRAM, and like I mentioned before, it's always recommended to have around a GB of VRAM freed up so that you don't experience any stutters or slowdowns whenever you decide to watch a stream or a YouTube video. Either way, I didn't see a single stutter on high settings, and it was a smooth gaming experience from start to finish. On average, we achieved a solid 104 FPS. Cyberpunk 2077. Ultra settings at native 1080p resolution. Now, while the GPU might technically be able to run it on these settings, we still gotta keep in mind how demanding the game is on the CPU. As such, in really crowded areas, we are gonna see the FPS drop below 60, which honestly isn't all that noticeable. After all, we can always lower the graphics, especially crowd density and whatnot, and pretty much have a consistent 60 plus FPS at all times. Anyhow, even on ultra settings, the game still felt perfectly smooth, and I didn't see a single stutter at any point. Overall, we achieved around 74 FPS on average. Hogwarts Legacy. High settings at native 1080p resolution. Not the best optimized game when it comes to RAM usage. Not that we're gonna lose any FPS because of it, but it's still worth mentioning that this game uses way more RAM than it should. Regardless though, the gameplay was still very smooth, and it was honestly an enjoyable gaming experience from start to finish. On average, we achieved around 86 FPS. God of War Ragnarök. Ultra settings at native 1080p resolution. I have tested this game on quite a few PCs at this point, and I gotta say that it is really well optimized in comparison to most other games these days. Obviously, we're not gonna see any stutters here. We are running a bit higher specs than what the game is asking of us after all. But we also have to keep in mind that the cheapest GPU from 2025 is able to run God of War Ragnarök on ultra settings at 80ish FPS. I wish other games were just as well optimized as this. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Medium settings at native 1080p resolution. Now we've been able to run every other game on high or even ultra settings quite effortlessly up to this point, but it seems that this game is gonna bring yet another gaming PC to their knees. I mean, look at it, we're barely getting a stable 60ish FPS on medium settings, and it's not even that the game is poorly optimized. I mean, it's not perfect, but there are just way too many enemies that need to be loaded at the same time, which means that both the CPU and the GPU have to do a lot of work. Although I do have to say that regardless of how heavy the game is on the hardware, it is running way smoother than you would imagine, cause throughout this 20-ish minute mission I didn't see a single stutter or frame drop of any kind, and it was a smooth gaming experience from start to finish. On average, we achieved around 64 FPS. Overall, I honestly had a good time. Yes, it's an RTX 5050, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really mean much. To people like you or me who really care about the stats and know just by how much this or that GPU outperforms the rest, it does hit different when we hear that someone purchased an RTX 5050 as opposed to a used RTX 3070 for example. but to most other people it doesn't really make too much of a difference as long as they can run the games that they want at reasonable settings at 60 plus FPS. Besides, we never know when a used GPU decides to brick itself. I mean, I do protect my customers for a year when it comes to used hardware, but after that, imagine if someone bought like a used RTX 3070 PC from me, and then that very GPU died a few months after their 1-year warranty. That's honestly something that I never want any of my customers to experience. We see all of these videos about people building amazing PCs from used parts, but we never hear the stories about what happened to those very PCs after a few months, and this is very important. When you're on a tight budget, you really cannot afford to lose any component due to a degradation or to anything else really. You want your PC to last as long as possible, which is honestly the main goal for my PCs. Yes, we're gonna lose a bit of performance cause we got a brand new RTX 5050 instead of a used 3070. But an RTX 5050 is gonna last way longer than a used RTX 3070, which is already like 5 years old at this point. And I do hear the people that say, oh, I've never heard anyone's RTX 3070 die this early. Well, I have. I've worked with thousands upon thousands of components. Yes, you are more likely not to get a faulty GPU, but whenever you do, it really sucks. And I do hear you when you guys say that it's not my problem at that point, but it is, and I want it to be. That's the sole reason why I do what I do. But do let me know in the comments below. What do you think about all this? Would you risk it and build a PC with used parts, or would you rather just go for new ones and build a brand new PC instead? On that note, let's wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'm gonna see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.